sisters. Hello, dear friends. So here we are, week 1 of the Armor of God study. And I have been praying for you. I've been praying with you. And I hope that you are starting to get into the study. I know that several of us have voiced in the group how we have been challenged by the season. We've had a hard time getting into the study because we are being challenged in this season or for whatever reason. And so today I hope this message blesses you. I hope that we can break through some of those challenges and some of those restraints from jumping right in. And I would love to hear back from you all what you're getting out of the study. You know, I realized in my video last week that I made it a lot about me, a lot about what I didn't want to do, a lot about why I didn't want to do it. And it was all about like, oh God, I don't want to do this, right? And Samael, she posted after watching the first video with Priscilla that she realized that when we're talking about putting on the armor of God, we're not talking about putting on our own armor. We're not talking about putting on what we can already do. We're talking about putting on His armor. We're talking about putting on God's armor and tapping into the unnatural resources that we don't have for ourselves. And so that really challenged me and really stretched me to think not about what I want to do in this season, but what about God's doing in this season? What about when I put His armor on, what that opens up in my life? So let's just rewind, because as I'm sitting here looking at my hair, right? When I thought about this study and about the video schedule, I thought, oh, I'd be here in full makeup with my hair done and all that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is that I'm super busy, and just like you. And so I come here at 4 o'clock in the morning to meet with God and to meet with you and to do what I need to do. No makeup, a little bit of lip gloss. I did brush my teeth. But I say that to say, like, when will your prayer time be? I think God honors our time that we spend with Him, but we have to commit to spending that time with Him. So I'm asking you, set your prayer time. Generally, my alarm is going off every morning at 5:30 in the morning because that's my time for coffee with Christ. This morning, I think I was a little worried about when I was going to get this video done, and the Spirit woke me, and now I'm wide awake and ready to go, and this is the perfect time to meet you here. But be strategic about when your prayer time is going to be. Don't go through your day and think at the end of the day, oh, I'm going to spend time with God, because we know how that happens, right? We're tired. The day has worn us out. We don't always make it there. So be strategic about when you're going to spend time with God. Be specific in your prayers and take this very seriously. Um, Sometimes I catch myself saying like kind of rote prayers just to be able to say I prayed. That's not what this is. That's not what this season is about. We want to be serious. And I wrote a note here that says no rushed prayers, right? And that's a part of setting aside the space to meet with God, to commune with Him, so that you have time to be in His presence. So week 1, how many of you all actually were able to watch the video? It was really, really good. I have, despite the fact that I feel like several of us were having difficulty getting here and getting into the study this first week, I have notes and notes and notes, pages of notes from the first week of the study. It's that good. So in the video, Priscilla starts introducing the first week, and she's talking about sizing up the enemy. And she talks about an invisible battle is taking place where you and I get the privilege of swaying the balance toward victory in the name of Jesus Christ, right? And prayer is our tool to get there. Prayer is how we access swaying that balance. Um, the focus of the study is Ephesians 6:12, and so the battle is unavoidable. So I want you to yell at me right now and say, "Girl, you're in a wrestling match," because there is a battle going on. Open war is upon us, whether we engage or not. Spiritual warfare. What is this all about? As long as you think other people are the problem, we have missed the mark, right? We've missed the mark because Ephesians 6:12 tells us, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places." So spiritual warfare is happening in heavenly places. So if we are pointing our warfare at people, places, things, situations, we're missing the mark. We shouldn't target our words or our actions towards what we can see, because this war is waging in invisible places. Priscilla in the video gives an example of being at a kiddie carnival. And it's that time of year where all of the kiddie carnivals and fall festivals at our kids' schools happen. And you know how they have that booth where they have a sheet hanging and you go and there's puppets bobbing from behind the sheet and you pick a puppet and then there's a number on the bottom of the puppet and you get a prize. She gives an example of a time where they visited a festival and that happened. And she talks about how the curtain came down and all of the adults back there bobbing the puppets were totally exposed, right? The puppets, what we can see on our side of the curtain, the people in our lives that we're battling, those people that very first day where we wrote in the circle in the book, the people that we needed to pray for, the people and the situations that we're wrestling with. And then we wrote on the line outside of it, "Not the real enemy." Those people in that bubble, those are the puppets that we see on the other side of the curtain. And if we point our words and our actions and our frustrations at them trying to fix the situation, we're missing the mark. Who is behind the curtain? Well, Ephesians 6:12 says that they are in heavenly places, waging war, right? The battle is happening in heavenly places where we cannot see it. So that is where we need to engage in the battle. That is where we need to learn to not be frustrated by the fact that I told you or I asked you to do this thing and you went and did that thing and now I'm mad at you and I just don't understand why you can't get it right. That's the wrong battle to fight. Prayer is our divine mechanism that allows us to tap into these heavenly places, because just like Priscilla said in her video, I'm an earthling and I'm pretty human on most days. I'd like to think that I'm all spiritual, but I'm pretty human and regular on most days. And so prayer is the mechanism that allows us to engage in this war that's happening in heavenly places. I love it because Jesus said, "My house should be called a house of prayer." Your house should be called a house of prayer. Our houses should be called a house of prayer. I think about, in the movie War Room, when Miss Claire is selling her house, and the pastor and wife that come in and they're viewing the house, when he opens her prayer closet, he steps in and he steps out and he steps in and he steps out and he steps in and he says, "Somebody's been praying in here, right? Our houses should be so thick with the Spirit of God because we've been engaging in warfare through prayer, right? That's the kind of house that I want. I want my house to be a house of prayer. So, a few things about this study that I want to reiterate. If you refuse to pray, you will be wasting your time. And I say that because I enjoy having you here. I want to be on this journey with you. I'm excited about this journey together. But I think it's important that it's not enough to talk about prayer. We have to pray. And so if you refuse to pray during the study, if the enemy is trying to keep you away from engaging in this battle and you're not feeling motivated to pray, let me know. Send me a private message so we can pray together about that. Because if you refuse to pray, you'll be wasting your time. Paul knew in his letter to the Ephesians that prayer was able to change the trajectory of their entire lives. Victory is inseparable from prayer. We already know that in the end, we win, right? We're on God's side. So in the end, we win. We know that. Victory is ours. But we have the ability to call that victory down into our current day situations if we will tap into our divine mechanisms to access those heavenly places. And that is prayer. And so calling that victory down, it's inseparable from prayer. Prayer activates our resources. So there was an exercise in the study where Priscilla wanted us to write out, this is week 1 we're still talking about. Let me find the notes. Where Priscilla wanted us to write out our translation of what we were reading. So she writes, everything that occurs in the visible physical world is directly connected to the wrestling match being waged in the invisible spiritual world. And she said, underline the last sentence, then rewrite it below in your own words. And what I got from that was, what I see is being fought where I can't see it. And that's my cue to remember when I'm ready to go tell you, you should do this, or that person that I feel like I'm struggling with, when I want to go tell them, why can't you just be that? I have to remember that what I see is not who I'm fighting. What I see is being fought in places where I can't see it. And so prayer is my way of tapping into those unseen places to be able to fight the battle. The enemy may be invisible, but he's not fictional. He's very, very real. Okay? The first step in utilizing my spiritual resources is to recognize that I have them. Recognize what prayer is in your life. Recognize what prayer has the ability to do in your life. Praying with precision is absolutely key. As I started out at the beginning, we don't want any quick prayers. No lazy prayers, right? We want focused, strategic prayers. God honors that we set aside time to meet with Him, and we value that time with Him. We don't want to just give God, the most powerful being in our entire lives, rushed prayers. We don't want to do that. Prayer is how we keep our whole selves engaged and alert, trusting God for the right things, confident He's giving them, able to sense His direction, and then take action accordingly. God has deliberately chosen this particular vehicle, prayer, as the one that drives His activity in people's lives. God chose it. God chose that. So, in closing today, I want to share a few stories with you. And these are found both in the Armor of God and in Fervent. But they were just so good, and the parallel that came from them really stood out for me. So first, um, we're looking at 2 Kings chapter 6, 15 through 17. And we're talking about the prophet Elisha and one of his servants. And so it reads, when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh, my Lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, O Lord, open his eyes so he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And then we're going to look at Ephesians 1:18. And Paul writes, I pray also that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in the saints, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is like the working of his mighty strength, which he exerted in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places. So how was Elisha's prayer for his servant similar to Paul's prayer for the Ephesians? Open my eyes, Lord. Open my eyes so that I can see the great powers that you've already given me. The ability to engage in war, the ability to access heavenly places, the vehicle you have given us to access heavenly places, to call down victory into our current day lives, into our current day situations. The final story I want to share with you comes from the book of Fervent. It again involves Elisha and one of his servants. It comes from 2 Kings chapter 6 again, verses 1 through 7. And it's for those of us who may be at a low passion point right now, where we'll start to feel ourselves being tugged. And when that season comes, I want us to remember this story, or if you're in that season, I want you to remember this story so that we can be excited about getting into the presence of God again, so that we can run and come boldly to the throne of grace and be excited about the fact that we have victory in Christ, and all we have to do is call it down and use our weapon, our tongues, our prayers to call that down. So here's the short story I want to share directly from Fervent. It says, as it happened, the prophet Elisha was standing near one of his proteges, who was chopping down a tree at the banks of the Jordan River, laboring to gather the raw materials needed for building a larger meeting place. But at one point, in either an upswing or a downswing, the iron head of that man's axe wiggled loose from its wooden handle and sailed into the water, plopping to the bottom. And just like that, he'd lost his cutting edge. The young prophet was horrified. Not only had he lost the one tool on hand, the most important tool in the toolbox for moving him toward the outcome he desired, but the axe he'd been using had been borrowed from a friend. The kerplunk of that dead weight in the water was a double whammy of disappointment and disgust. He couldn't go forward with his building project, and now he'd need to go to the person who'd loaned him the axe and tell what happened to it. That he'd broken it, lost it, and there was no getting it back. Notice, though, these encouraging details from the story. Number 1, despite the lost axe head, the presence of God was still near. Okay, in ancient Israel, Yahweh's prophets were representations of his presence and the power with his people. So when the man in the story lost the axe head, the fact that the prophet Elisha was right there alongside him wasn't just a simple comfort. It mattered that Elisha had seen how hard this man had worked. Okay. Number two, the servant was doing something good when he lost his cutting edge. He was being productive, building a new dwelling for himself and for those others involved in the school of the prophets. In fact, if he hadn't been working so hard, if he'd just been sitting around doing nothing, there's little chance the axe would have ever become gradually loosened and ultimately dislodged. This tells me that being engaged in good, even godly, productive things is not an automatic guard against losing your cutting edge. In fact, one of Satan's dirtiest little tactics is to sneak in and steal it while you're square in the middle of investing yourself. Number three, the axe was borrowed. The presence of passion, faith, and belief in our hearts is a gift. It's on loan to our souls. Like the man's axe, our passion and spiritual fervor come from someone else as a gift to us. That someone is capitalized, big S. If you've ever cried out passionately to God in faith, fully believing that He is able to do more than you ask or think or imagine, it's only because He first stirred up that passion within you. So instead of always feeling guilty, personally responsible whenever your passion in prayer is weak or missing, realize instead that it is God's work both to give it and then to fan it into flame inside you, which means you cannot manufacture it on your own. Your enemy, however, coy as he is, wants to burden you with blame for not having something that didn't originate with you in the first place. Don't fall for that. Number four, only a work of God could retrieve the axe head. Where did it fall? The man of God asked. When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it into the water at that spot. Then the axe head floated to the surface. Miraculously, by Elisha's hand, the slab of iron rustled free from the murky riverbed and bobbed up to the surface as if it were nothing but a floating chunk of driftwood. There it was. His cutting edge was back, divinely recovered. Elisha's servant had understandably been convinced there was no hope of ever seeing again, and there wouldn't have been, except that he went to Elisha. God, through the prophet, stepped in and made it reappear. If the axe head had just dropped onto the ground, anybody who saw where it went, including the man himself, could have picked it up and salvaged it. Instead, it was deep in the river. Only a miracle could get it back. Just like you might need a miracle to get yours back too, if it sunk to the bottom, like everyone's passion for prayer has done at one time or another. Listen to me. Nothing is too far gone that your God cannot resurrect it, even your cutting edge. So go to Him to get it back. Don't try to regain it yourself. Don't set your hopes on other people or circumstances to fuse it back into the fiber of your being. Trust it into God's care. Only His miraculous work can make it bubble back up to the surface where it belongs, and He is more than willing to do it. Miracles have the opportunity to be performed in the presence of God. This story is from the beginning of chapter 6. A few moments ago, I shared a little bit later in chapter 6 where the army was coming against them. And Elisha said, don't be afraid. Our God is greater, right? In the presence of God, miracles happen. But we have to get in the presence of God. We need miracles to happen in our lives. I know I need miracles to happen in my life. And so I have to put on His armor. And I have to access His weapons through prayer. It's in His presence that those miracles can happen. And so I hope that if you are at a low passion point in your life, or if you really are having trouble getting into this study, if you're really having trouble getting into meeting God, be strategic. Set your alarm clock before the break of dawn. Meet Him there. Be specific about what you're asking him for. You know, I once heard the word says, God will give you the desires of your heart. And I once heard long ago, I can't even remember who it was, a preacher say that it's not that God is going to give you the house, the car, the this, the that, all of those desires. But God, when you're in his presence, when you're so in tune with what God's will is for your life, he gives you the actual desires of your heart. He's the one that sets the desires that your heart has. Don't you want that kind of relationship with him? Don't you want to be in his presence and have that level of intimacy with him? That's my prayer this week, is that we engage him and we put on his armor, not ours, his. And that we really find ourselves passionate and strategic about getting into his presence. I love you all so much. Week 2, here we go.